going on, guys? Welcome back to the Lock and Cash podcast, NFL Wild Card Edition. We have made it to the playoffs. 18 weeks are in the books. I skipped this video last week because week 18 was just a crapshoot. I didn't have any big plays. I sprinkled a few here and there. I think we ended up going 2-3 or 2-2, something like that. But it wasn't, it wasn't a week that I thought it was worth it for me to get on here and give, because any takes I gave you, they were going to be lukewarm. I wasn't super strong on anything. There was too much uncertainty. And honestly, anytime I had an idea or a take on something, the next day it would be thrown out the window by somebody sitting, or this person's going to rest, or this team is going to do this. So it was just kind of a wacky week. But this weekend, we've got some great playoff matchups. So the regular season is in the books. We look to the playoffs to finish strong and get us, secure us a winning season for the 4th straight year. So that's what I'm hoping to do here in the playoffs. So let's get it started. Let's get right into it. We've only got obviously 6 games, so this will be a shorter podcast than usual. And we'll kick it off on Saturday with the LA Chargers laying 3 points on the road against the Houston Texans. LA 11-6 on the season, Houston 10-7. And this is really the story of two teams that finished the season in complete opposite ways. The LA Chargers really strong down the stretch, winning out, although it was against, a few weak teams, but they did a good job taking care of the teams that they needed to beat. Houston really struggling. Even after the bye week, they came out, got a nice win, but ever since then, it's just been a struggle. Dropped 2 of their last 3 games. They did beat the Titans on Sunday, but that really isn't saying much. Titans, one of the worst teams in the league, got the first pick in the draft. How about that? The Patriots winning against the Bills. It does just funny stuff. So you have now, as a result of, the trajectory of these two teams, you have a home underdog in a playoff game getting a full field goal. So let's start with the matchup. If I just look, if I forget the point spread and just look at the matchup, I know who the better team is. I think the Chargers are the better team. All right, this is an indoors game, so we don't have to worry about the elements. That's good for them because they're, a West Coast team. I think they have the better head coach. I love Harbaugh as a head coach. I think they have the better quarterback. I think Herbert is better than Stroud at this point. I like how their offensive line matches up against the defensive line of the Houston Texans. So I do see quite a bit of advantages for LA. The problem here is that no matter how much I tweak my ratings and move things around and try to get to this number, I can't. I simply can't get to them being a 3-point favorite on the road. And I can understand the argument of they should be bumped up. They should be, raised in the power ratings list, and Houston should be downgraded in the power. Like, I get all that, but even if I do it, I can't get to this number. I think it's just a little. I think there's a bit of an inflation here, a bit of a premium on the Chargers because of what Houston did down the stretch. But if I really take a look at those games, 2 of their last 3 games, they did have to play the Chiefs. They did have to play the Ravens, and they were 2 very quick turnarounds. It was a Saturday to a Wednesday right around the holiday, the Christmas holiday. So pretty tough stretch of games, especially after losing Tank Dell with that brutal injury. So this is a team that's pretty thin offensively, kind of depleted, but still a very strong defense. Here's my take on this game. I think if this was a week 7, a week 8 game, and the Chargers came in and they were like, they're 5-2. Let's say it's week 8. Chargers are 5-2, and the Texans are like, 4-3 or 3-4. They're struggling. We would be going crazy right now. All the touts, all the handicappers, the services like mine, we'd all be yelling, buy low. It's a home underdog getting a field goal, and nobody wants to bet them. Buy low. And now, just because it's a playoff game, suddenly nobody wants a piece of the Texans. So I think I might want a piece of the Texans then in that case. That makes me like this side a bit more. You're still talking about one of the really good defenses left in the NFL in Houston's. A really great secondary. I think back to that game when they came out of their bye week and they were rested and refreshed, and the offense still looked the same, right? It didn't look any better. It was that game against the Dolphins. But I go back to that game, and if you just watch some of the tape on that game of how their DBs locked down Waddle and Hill, and Miami couldn't do anything throwing the football. And I just think that you could see something similar here because of the makeup of this Chargers offense. It's really McConkey or bust. I know Quentin Johnston makes plays here and there. I know they've got guys that can, once in a while you can throw a ball to them. But this is really a Ladd McConkey-powered offense. And Houston's very good against the rush. So I don't, foresee J.K. Dobbins having a big game here. So I think LA, especially if you get down early in this game, I know Herbert's great. He makes some amazing plays. But this is a really good Houston secondary. and they're good against the run. And I just think they have enough, where they lack on offense, they have enough defensive talent and skill to, in my mind, keep this game close. Now, remember, CJ Stroud's first playoff game, he was a home underdog. I think it was 2.5, and they won that game outright. I believe it was against the Cleveland Browns. So he's not unfamiliar to this role as the home underdog, right? And in his career so far, he's been very good ATS as a dog, but not good when he has to lay points. So I just kind of think this is such an interesting game because you're going to see the whole world on LA in this game because it just seems so easy, right? And even especially when this comes down, which you can get a 2.5 juiced, a 2.5 minus 115, minus 120 at some books. I mean, how appealing of a bet is that? Laying the points with Herbert and Harbaugh, who have proven to be a really good duo. But, one of the things, again, that I'll finish off with about the Chargers is they have not played a great schedule of opposing quarterbacks. And they have a phenomenal record against teams below 500. And I believe they have 2 wins against teams above 500. And those 2 wins were both the Denver Broncos. So I think, kind of interesting here, an interesting contrast of teams that are headed in different directions. And listen, you want to say that I just feel like people are getting scared off of the Houston side just because it's a playoff game. But in the regular season, we would be running to bet this. We would be running to take 3 with Houston at home and screaming how it's a buy low home underdog spot. So pretty strong. I haven't bet this yet, full disclosure, but I'm leaning pretty strongly to Houston if I can get a 3 at minus 110, which was available earlier in the week before I did my research and my handicapping. But right now you've got 315, 317 at River. So if I can get a 310 plus 3 minus 110, I think I will go ahead and jump on the Houston Texans. All right, the second game on Saturday is the Steelers taking on the Ravens, and this spread is all the way up to 10 right now. Baltimore minus 10 at home. Divisional matchup. Obviously, these teams split in the regular season. The Steelers won their game at home against the Ravens as small home dogs. They then went to Baltimore, got blown out in the second game. Now, the Ravens were minus 7.5 in that game, if you guys recall, or 7.5, somewhere around there. And they won it comfortably. And now you got them laying 10. And I know it seems like it's maybe an inflation, an overreaction. But man, it's hard not to overreact to what the Steelers look like ending the season. They just ended the season on a brutal stretch. And I talked about this probably 4 or 5 podcasts ago about how the easy part of their schedule, they switched to Russell Wilson at quarterback right when they got the nice cushy part of their schedule. And the last 5-6-ish games of their schedule were going to be brutal. They had the Philly game, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bengals. And guess what happened? They lost every one of those games. Even against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, who, let's be honest, everyone's been able to score on them. The Steelers couldn't do anything, 17 points in that game. So I worry about the offense mainly. The defense is still obviously good, but it doesn't really matter how good you are, how good this Pittsburgh defense is. This Ravens offense is just so elite. It's truly elite. They have options all over the field. They have the best running back in the NFL. It's just really tough. It's so tough to match up with them. It's Tomlin as a dog. It's Tomlin in the divisional game, but none of that mattered a couple of weeks ago when they got blown out by the Ravens. And I don't think it's going to matter in this game either. So while this isn't my favorite point spread, I'm not running to lay 10 with the Ravens or 9.5, but that is the only way I'd look in this game. I'm not interested in the Steelers. I think the way they ended the season is not what they actually are as a team, but closer to what they actually are than what you saw earlier in the year when they were, whatever it was, 10-3. That's not this real Steelers team. So I also will say that one thing to watch out for in this game is the Wilson to Pickens deep ball connection, which was thriving earlier in the season. Keep an eye on that because you saw it in the last game against the Bengals. They couldn't get anything going. The frustration of Pickens started to show. He's yelling at the fans. This is a guy that historically will give up on a game. And if they struggle again through this game, I could see something like that happening in the third quarter, emotions boiling over, and sometimes it's not something obvious, right? You go back and watch film or watch highlights and you'll see him on running plays or whatever it is, or passing plays that don't go to him, just visibly gives up on the play. Just like stops running or not interested in the play unless the ball's coming to him. And that's not a good trait to have. So when Pickens is one of these receivers where when things are going great, no issues. as soon as you face some adversity, he's not really a guy you want to be in the foxhole with. So I don't like anything about the Steelers coming into this game. I don't see it as a buy low spot the way I do on Houston. So just my 2 cents there. I would go Ravens or pass. The final AFC game is the Broncos taking on the Buffalo Bills. We've got 8.5s and some 9s popping up in the market now as well. Buffalo laying 8.5 at home. Now, another very interesting game because Denver finished strong as well to end the season. The Bills just kind of, the Bills had a great season, 13-4. Obviously lost that last game, but they weren't, there was a game where they were resting. Wasn't a big deal to them. So no urgency there. Some interesting things here are, in my opinion, the matchup to watch out for, because I can break down the Bills offense versus the Denver defense. And I think nobody would be surprised if they have success there. The Bills, Allen's played amazing. They're one of the best offenses. The other side of the ball, I think, is how you're going to figure out who's going to cover the spread, because the Denver offense has to be able to move against the Buffalo defense. Can they? Sure. The Buffalo defense hasn't looked elite at essentially any point this season. I mean, maybe early in the season, really early, but since the midpoint of the season, they haven't looked elite by any stretch. My biggest question here is what does Bo Nix, a rookie quarterback, do in this spot? Is the moment too big? Now, for most of the season, the moment hasn't been too big for him. He's played pretty well, although the Broncos have not really faced many great offenses. I'll get to that in a second. But he's played well enough to win 10 games. He did his job, right, as a starting quarterback in the NFL. His team's in the playoffs. But I just think, man, a rookie quarterback, yes, you've got a good veteran head coach, but you're going into a really tough, this is a great home field that Buffalo has. They perform very well at home. I'm just not sure he can do enough to stay, because I think the Bills are going to put up points. So the question here is, can the Broncos put up enough points to stay within the number? And I just think the answer is no. I don't see it happening. I don't see him going in there and slinging it. They don't have a great rushing attack to begin with. So if you get down in this game, you're going to have to start throwing. I'm just not seeing Bo Nix going into Buffalo, such a tough place to play in the freezing cold, and putting up great passing numbers. Just not seeing it. I think a rested Buffalo defense can do enough here to prevent the Broncos from being in this game late. So I lean to the Bills. The last thing I'll say is, looking at the opposing schedule, I was talking with a friend about this earlier today. The opposing schedule of quarterbacks that the Broncos have faced, man, the list is not impressive at all. He was like Geno Smith, Aaron Rodgers, Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew twice. And anytime they've stepped up in competition in terms of the opposing quarterback, let's look at it, right? They've played 5 games where the opposing quarterback has been what I would consider a well above average quarterback. So that those games were against, obviously, Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and then 2 games against Justin Herbert. Those are the 5 games that I'm not going to count the second game against Mahomes because he didn't play. So 5 games total. In those 5 games, they went 0-5 straight up and 1-4 against the spread. So what does that tell me? I think I smell a bit of an overrated defense here. And I think that going up against Josh Allen, who aside from Lamar, he's had a better season than all of those guys, and presents a mobile threat. Man, this is just a tough man. I think this is probably the only game on the board, guys, that has blowout potential. Is this game right here, Denver Buffalo? I could see every other game being somewhat close, but I like the Bills in the spot. All right, moving over to Sunday, the NFC slate. We've got the Packers taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. We've now have 4.5s across the board. Philly minus 4.5 at home. We did start this game with a 5.5, a 5. They got taken out. Pro money came in on the Packers. The big question to me here is the health of both quarterbacks. Obviously, Love with they're both going to play, right? It's not about who's going to play, but to what extent will they be impacted? I don't think Jordan Love's going to be too much of an issue. I worry a little bit about Jalen Hurts only because it's a concussion. If it was a leg injury, a shoulder injury, whatever, we've seen guys play through that all the time, depending on the severity. But concussions are a little bit shaky. Quarterbacks typically come back. They're not the same maybe until a couple of games after. There's data out there on that. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But to me, because he is involved in the rushing attack of the Eagles, the tush push, the how good he is at the goal line, taking those physical runs and scoring touchdowns. It's just something to think about. I don't think it's going to be a huge thing, but we're dealing with very sharp markets. We need to find anything, any little edge that we can exploit. And I just think that could be something. Are they maybe less hesitant to run him like they normally would because he's recovering from a concussion? And if you have ever researched or read about concussion science and in specifically as it's related to the NFL, that first game back or that first 2 or 3 games back is when you're most likely to get reconcussed, and is when it's most dangerous, to be honest, when the damage could be worse. So really the way the brain heals from a concussion is rest, long periods of rest. So obviously he's had a couple weeks. Getting up and playing a physical football game is not ideal, but it is what, this is what these guys get paid for. But it's just something to consider. The fact that it's a concussion is in the back of my head. But at this current number, though, at 4.5, I lean Philly. I think for me to play Green Bay, I got to have a 6 in this game. And this spread never was at 6, and I'm not sure that it ever will get to 6. You're also in kind of this dead zone here. So if you do, let's say you do either side of this game, really, but just from my perspective, because I'm leaning Philly, laying 4.5 versus 4 versus 5.5, these are all, not that they don't matter. You should always try to get the best number, but we're not dealing with key numbers here. So you're kind of in this dead space between 3.5 and 5.5 to where I'm not too worried about this. So if you like a certain side, take the side, because you're never going to see a 3 and you're never going to see a 6, I don't think. And those are really the next 2 key numbers that you would look for in this game. So just my thoughts on that, but I would lean to the Eagles. I will say, though, out of all the games on this list, this is probably the game that I have the least strongest opinion on. So, keep that in mind. The late game on Sunday is the Washington Commanders taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is now 3 across the board. This was originally 3.5, and I was pretty interested in Washington at that number. The 3.5s got taken out very quickly, so I never really got a shot to get it myself or to give it out to subscribers. So we're left here with this solid 3 across the board. Now, this 3 is shaded to the Buccaneers side, 3 minus 120, minus 115. So there's a chance you could see a 3.5 pop back up. I think the big question here is, the 2 secondaries, because these 2 teams are going to want to throw the football. All right. And they've got 2 guys that are very capable, that have been very good at it all season long. No surprise that this is the highest total on the board for the weekend at 50.5. I do think you'll see points in this game. The biggest thing for me is, okay, the Commanders are getting Marshawn Lattimore back. Well, he hasn't played with them at all yet, but he'll be making his debut in the secondary just in time for his buddy Mike Evans, right? Rehash some old history there. The other side of the ball is my big concern here, though. The Tampa Bay secondary. Are you going to have Winfield for this game? What is their secondary going to look like? They were dealing with multiple injuries to starters back there. If you watch that Saints game, and honestly the few games before that, their secondary does not look good. Now you get Jaden Daniels in here, who is having a phenomenal rookie year and can throw the ball. 12 wins. What a success this has been for Washington with that draft pick. I think he's going to be able to pass on this Buccaneers defense. This game to me is, thinking like referring back to the Buffalo game, it's such a strong home field. You don't have that with Tampa Bay. It's not a strong home field. You'll have Commanders fans there. You'll hear them. So I think it's going to be interesting. I would have to lean right now at 3 to the Commanders. At 3.5, I may play the Commanders. So that's how important the hook is when you're dealing with the key number of 3. It's the most important number in football. So a 3.5 here would probably be a go for me on Washington. And I think that, like I asked the question earlier, can Bo Nix do enough to stay within the number? And I said no. I think Jaden Daniels can do enough. I think he can have enough success in this game against this defense, specifically the secondary. They're going to have success throwing the ball. So I think he could stay within this number. And I think he could maybe make this a shootout where it's like you're going back and forth, and the team that has the ball last might be the team that wins the game on a walk-off field goal. So in that case, I want to have 3.5 in my pocket. That's kind of how I look at this game. So I think points in this game, and I lean to the underdog. Would really hope that the market pops back up with a 3.5. I would go ahead and take Washington there. All right, last game of the wild card weekend, the Minnesota Vikings taking on the LA Rams. Minnesota minus 1.5 on the road in this game. Such a small number. Guys, think back to earlier in the season. The Rams did play the Vikings. This exact matchup, it was on Thursday Night Football, and the Rams were +3, closed, I think, +2.5 at home. And they won that game outright, and they did a good job. They beat up the Vikings. That was when the Vikings lost their 2 games in a row. They just came off the loss to Detroit, then they lost that game to the Rams, and then ever since then it was just like nothing but win, 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 win until they ran into the Lions again on Sunday. But I just think it's just interesting. You know, I'm watching all all the media coverage, all the reactions of what the Lions did to them, and it was super impressive. The Lions played great, and just basically picked them apart. Um, but it's just interesting to me that it's like now all of a sudden are we out? Or is everyone out all of a sudden? This is like the same vibe I get with the Texans game. Are we all of a sudden all out on the Vikings as a legit team, a legit contender in the NFC? I'm not so sure that I'm ready to say that. All right, this is such a small number here, -1.5. How can you really tell me with a meaningless number of 1 that you have value on this Rams team at home? Yes, they're rested. Yes, you have a good head coach and a good quarterback combo. But what is really the thing that hurt the Vikings offense on Sunday Night Football this past weekend? It's really pressure. That's what it was. Pressure was what got to Darnold. He missed guys that he usually hits. He missed his reads that were wide open that he didn't get. This narrative that the Lions secondary shut them down is nonsense. There was guys wide open all over the field for the entire game. Darnold wasn't able to make the plays because I think number 1, the moment was a little big for him, but also number 2, they were getting pressure. Okay. The Rams for the season, 19th in pressure rate, well below average. They don't get a ton of sacks. They don't blitz a ton. It's a good matchup. The first time they played, it seemed like the Rams played so well and were the better team, but it was a horrible situational spot for the Vikings in hindsight. Now, when I look back on it, short week off a divisional game that was back and forth. They lost by 2 points, I think it was, to the Lions. Then they go hit the road on a short week. It was a bad spot and the Rams are waiting for them. So now the Vikings, they have an extra day of rest. I think this is just I think this is another, just like Houston, another potential buy low spot on a team that's been the better team all season long, that suddenly now after one dud, one bad game, we're now throwing out Sam Darnold. And I know it sounds like during the season, when he was playing so great, I'm like, he can't be that good. He can't be that good. When's there going to be a chance to fade this team, right? But now I'm here to take, because you got to be contrarian. You got to try to find ways to be contrarian when you're sports betting every single day, full time, 24/7. You have to find ways to be contrarian. And if I tweak my numbers, like I said, let me go ahead and pull up my ratings sheet while we're doing this. Since we're on the last game here. If I tweak my numbers, I've got 6. So I've got a 5. Yeah. So the best I can do if I'm generous is 2. My Minnesota -2, but really 2.5 is really what it should be. So, and that's where it was, and it came back down. So I just think it's interesting. Yeah, the market is showing a little bit of respect to the Rams, but this is another game where the home field isn't very strong. It's in LA. There will be a lot of Vikings fans there. You will hear them. And I just think it's a potential buy low spot. So I lean to Minnesota. Again, is it my favorite bet of the weekend? No, but I do lean, to the Vikings laying a small number against a team that honestly, the Rams, yes, they put it together late in the season, but I'm not sure this team is that good. They have a very good offense, but the defense to me is still a question mark. And, these Kevin O'Connell, I know a lot of people are saying he was outcoached on Sunday night. Aaron Glenn did a really good job against that offense. Maybe, I still feel like it came down a lot to Darnold, but O'Connell, he's a very good coach. And these very good coaches, when they have dud games like that, they very, very rarely, guys, have 2 in a row. I'm just speaking from experience and history. These guys that are very good, that we consider some of the best coaches in the NFL, they don't put together back-to-back stinkers. So I think they'll be the Vikings will come into this extra focused. I think the emphasis during the week will be on that offense and how they correct those things that they did, because the defense didn't play so bad against the Lions, but it's hard to stay in, it's locked in defensively when your offense is putting forth such a pathetic performance. So I think they will look better in this game. They'll look stronger in this game. And while I don't think the Rams are just going to lay down and get blown out, but I just can't help but lean to the Vikings here with a small number off of a dud game like that. So that's where I am with this game. So that is the week, guys. Let me know what you think of these games down in the comments. I will do one of these videos every round going forward. Remember, down in the description, the Action Network app is where I will post a few more free plays throughout the week. So follow me on there to get those. And I will be putting up a playoff package. I'll link that down below as well. A playoff pass, if for those of you who are interested in getting on board and riding out the rest of the season with us through to the Super Bowl, I'll put a promo down there for you guys as well. Thanks for watching. As always, I'll catch you guys next week. Let's get it.